Hey there, true crime fans. Welcome back to For Criming Out Loud and our bedtime series called Crime Me to Sleep. We've been reading While Idaho Slept, and this is the 7th episode. So if you're new here, make sure you subscribe. That way you can go into the playlist and start any book we've covered from the very beginning. Let's get into episode 7 of While Idaho Slept. Part 6, Chapter 28. When Ethan Chapin's mother gave birth to her triplets, Ethan was first out of the womb, followed by his siblings at exactly 1-minute intervals. Ethan and his younger brother, Hunter, and sister, Maisie, shared an unusual bond. Of the roughly 3.6 million births in America each year, only about 3,000 are triplet births. Jim and Stacy felt especially blessed by an instantaneously full family. The Chapin trio and their parents lived in Mount Vernon, Washington, on the banks of the Skagit River, in the Skagit Valley farm country, famous for its tulip industry. In the springtime, the tulip farms were like wide rainbows of color nestled between green forests and the snow-covered mountain peaks that lined the horizon. The Chapin home was spacious, on an acre of lush green grass. Jim and Stacy owned Pacific Belting and Supply, selling and installing industrial conveyor belts, and made a nice living. Stacy had also been a teacher early on. The triplets attended the small public Conway School in Mount Vernon, from kindergarten through 8th grade. It was a close-knit place, with parents volunteering for field trips and in the classrooms. Outside school, the Chapins went on family vacations as the kids got older. They had the money and the love, and they didn't skimp on either with their kids. They traveled to the Dominican Republic and kayaked in the sea. They surfed in Mexico on boards twice as long as the kids were. They walked the beaches in the Bahamas with swim towels draped around their necks. Closer to home, they chartered boats. They golfed together, played tennis, and picked apples. Even just around the house, the family was active. They planted a box garden on their sprawling lawn and lined it with freshly cut wood chips, the green sprouts catching full sunlight. They played basketball in their driveway after dinner, with the sun going down and the clouds thinning, and their American flag occasionally waving in the breeze. All three of the kids briefly played the clarinet. Ethan enjoyed sports above anything. He played club soccer for years, traveling to weekend tournaments with his brother and sister. At the Conway School, girls and boys played on the same team. Maisie, Hunter, and Ethan all practiced and played together in their matching blue shirts. The only difference was the red headband Maisie wore to keep her long hair pushed back. Conway's superintendent, Jeff Cravey, spoke to a reporter about Ethan's sporting prowess. He was an amazing basketball player and often got into competitions with staff, especially during staff versus student basketball games, Cravey said. Our love language with him was sports, his mother Stacy told another reporter. She had followed NFL football, so she could bond with Ethan to a greater degree. She would send him text messages about the games she was watching. Stacy Chapin knew that sharing her children's passions would keep the family close. All three kids were athletic, so the family's life evolved around physical activities, especially when it came to Ethan. That and country music, his mom said, were his obsessions. He was a good-natured goof. He was definitely the comedian of the three kids, she added. He always had something funny to say, was always laughing. Ethan's youth basketball coach, the tattooed and bearded Tyler Amaya, said that to coach him was a pleasure. Ethan had been one of his favorite players, and one of the top players on their Skagit County team since elementary school, when he was already tall for his age. He would practice twice a week with Amaya at the basketball gym in Burlington, 10 minutes from home. He always gave you that sincere, genuine eye contact, Amaya told the local Fox station. You knew he was locked in with whatever you were telling him. Amaya and Ethan had stayed in contact over the years, even when Ethan was in college. Amaya could see a bright future for the boy. He lit up many of my dark days, Amaya told another reporter. Days where maybe things were wrong for me, went wrong for me. Ethan comes into the gym and all of a sudden everything is meaningful again. I don't have kids, but if I had a daughter, I'd want her to be with Ethan. Big-boned and broad-shouldered, Ethan was among the largest wherever he went. It was hard to imagine him falling prey to violence. In TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube videos, Ethan was always smiling. He wore shorts and shook his booty to any song that was playing, dancing in the living room, in his bedroom, in the kitchen. Always dancing, always gyrating for a quick laugh, with his strong legs bouncing across the floor. He got drunk with his friends, danced while wearing a woman's bikini top, played beer pong, dressed up as a hot dog, used an upturned safety cone as a bullhorn, sang country music into his fist like it was a microphone. When he was young, he was clean-shaven. Later, he grew a mustache. He shot hoops in the sun. He jumped over couches. He looked at the camera, somebody was pointing at him, and he gave it the peace sign, like a hello, but also an exit. Chapter 29. Ethan and his siblings went to Mount Vernon High School, a stately-looking brick and stone institution that brought Ivy League campuses to mind. The gym and basketball court still had its original 1950s-era wooden bleachers, heavily lacquered and polished to a shine. Each side of the nearby weight room was fully stocked with state-of-the-art lifting platforms for powerlifting and Olympic-style lifts. The Seattle Times referred to Mount Vernon's athletics facility as the gold standard of high school gymnasiums and the Sistine Chapel of Washington gyms. For somebody like Ethan, it was perfect. He played basketball for the school, and even as a sophomore, he was already 6'4", tied with another boy for the tallest on the Bulldogs team. In a team photo from the era, Ethan is resting his arm across the shoulder of his brother, Hunter, also a forward on the team. Hunter, standing 6'3", holds the basketball between his hands like a weapon. Even on the court, they stood side by side. Basketball, more than other sports, held Ethan's heart. He refereed youth basketball on the weekends in Mount Vernon and had a knack for communicating the nuances of the game to younger kids. His own positive experiences with his youth coach had rubbed off. He was shaping into a solid player and was doing well at Mount Vernon, but then the COVID-19 pandemic halted the school's regular operations. Ethan and his siblings left Washington State near the end of their junior year, immersing themselves in the natural world at the family's North Idaho summer home. They got jobs at the Hills Resort, a getaway loaded with lakeside and forest view cabins abutting the very blue, very pristine Priest Lake. At Hills, there was a restaurant with a stone hearth, boating and canoeing and kayaking options galore, and volleyball and tennis accommodations. The manicured, flowered grounds led directly into the seemingly endless forested hills, full of tamaracks and maples, which turned bright red in the fall. There was even a nearby golf course with guest boat moorage. The outdoor deck sat hundreds beneath its red canvas umbrellas and had a view of the waters where bugs dappled the surfaces and fish jumped to catch them. By autumn, the family had returned to Washington, but not to Mount Vernon High School, which was still dealing with the pandemic shutdowns. The triplets finished their senior year of high school remotely. Ethan often also worked in the fields at Skagit Valley Tulip Farm, a 5-acre parcel of nutrient-rich soil brimming with dozens of varieties of vibrant tulips. Ethan, like many of the local kids, went to work preparing, seeding, and harvesting the land. According to his crew leader, Andrew Miller, Ethan set the bar for showing up with a smile and making everyone else happy to be on the job, regardless of the weather or the work. And the weather and the work could be nasty at times, with plenty of rain and an equal measure of hard labor to make things uncomfortable. As a strong kid with a big heart, Ethan was the kind of guy who would do the hardest jobs and never complain, Miller said of him. Ethan and his siblings went back to Priest Lake for another summer, working at Hills Resort before all three headed for the University of Idaho. It was the summer after their senior year, but they'd really had no senior year at all, not in the traditional sense. There'd been none of the merrymaking that often accompanies those last months of secondary education, no homecoming or prom with its tuxedos and gowns, no decorating of lockers or vehicles to celebrate graduation. They had missed all that, and it was frustrating, but at Hills, they could ease back into the beautiful North Idaho landscape and dream about college, which hopefully would be accompanied by a return to their normal social lives. For now, Hills Resort wasn't such a bad stopover. They worked wherever the resort needed them. For Ethan, that was usually in the restaurant, where he bussed tables or worked as an expediter in the kitchen, a liaison between the cooks and the waitress staff, making sure the food got plated and served on time. Even when Ethan wasn't scheduled to work, he would sometimes sit at table 42, the tall round table in the resort's dining room, while Maisie worked her shift waiting tables. He'd watch her work, and if she got busy and needed help, Ethan would jump into action. There were times when Ethan had just gotten off the lake from boating and would notice his friends in the restaurant getting slammed with customers. He would run into the dining room in his wet swim trunks and flip-flops to help out. If he wasn't working or boating, he was on the volleyball court or playing another sport, and always he was surrounded by friends. After his murder, there were hundreds of comments about Ethan on the Hills Resort Facebook page from people who had remembered him working in the restaurant those summers. Everywhere in the comments, there were bright red hearts. Chapter 30. Jim and Stacy Chapin dropped their triplets off in Moscow on August 13th, 2021. The kids' backpacks were full of essentials, their rolling suitcases topped with IKEA bags. The sun was shining on every face in the family as they crossed the pavement together toward campus. Empty nesters, Stacy Chapin posted on Instagram. She and her husband wore sunglasses in the picture, beneath which she commented, "Only for a few moments did I need them." She was referencing the tears she'd hidden behind the lenses. The family had done everything together for almost 2 decades, and now the kids were embarking on their next adventure without Stacy and Jim. But at least the siblings had one another. Maisie joined Kappa Alpha Theta, a sorority house with a touch of Southern charm to its circular second-story patio and ornately carpeted, meandering staircase inside. Ethan and Hunter joined the Sigma Chi fraternity with its more drab accommodations, but a brotherhood the boys could appreciate. Inside the sprawling ranch-style Sigma Chi fraternity house, the living quarters were in sore need of updating. The bathrooms were so infrequently cleaned they looked like a biohazard. The bedrooms, though cleaner, were designed oddly, with mattresses squeezed closely together atop a series of wood-framed lofts with barely any ceiling clearance. But there was a secluded courtyard where parties could spill outside without much notice from the neighboring streets, from police, or from university officials. And there was an outdoor basketball hoop and concrete pad lined with spectator seating in the form of a dozen battered couches that became soggy in the rain, then dehydrated and filled with pollen by July. Ethan often took advantage of the makeshift court, shooting a basketball through the shifting net that could be seen from Band Field, between him and the King Road residence that he would begin to frequent after meeting Xana. That first fall semester of college, Stacy and Jim visited the kids for parent and family weekend. The family went to dinner together, tailgated, and watched the University of Idaho Vandals football team stomp Southern Utah for a 42-24 victory. Later, they played cornhole, tossing beanbags in the dark in front of the Sigma Chi fraternity house. Stacy posted about the day on her Instagram account. It was perfect. University of Idaho for the win. Ethan, like most kids just getting to college after 2 years of COVID lockdowns, was experiencing the joy of finally socializing with his peers again, but also the mild discomfort that accompanied renewed confinement to classrooms. According to an English department advisor, he was struggling slightly with the curriculum, but he was passing his courses and excelling socially. And he had become friends with Xana Kernodle and then started dating her. Stacy and Jim continued to bring their triplets together for family vacations, so life for the Chapin kids hadn't changed much. It had just gotten better. They had their freedom, and they had the comforts they'd grown up with at the same time. They spent their 2021 Christmas holiday at the Priest Lake vacation home. Maisie worked as a waitress at Hills during Christmas break, and she was excited to be her parents' server when they ate there, bringing drinks in copper mugs to their lacquered table, the snow outside through the dining room windows weighing down the branches of the tamarack trees. For spring break, the family went to Mexico and swam in an infinity pool overlooking the ocean, just north of Puerto Vallarta. The water was blue, and the wind was in the palm trees lining their resort. The summer after Ethan's freshman year, Xana got a taste of the seemingly luxurious lifestyle and cozy vibes that accompanied hanging out with the Chapin family. That was the summer Ethan brought her to Priest Lake. They spent time on the boat together, went golfing, took hikes. Xana had started following Ethan's mother's Instagram account and had begun to like her photos. In one, a small herd of deer trotted across the golf course, nestled between the groves of evergreen trees. In another, a turtle was released into a pond. Everything seemed perfect, even the family's vacation home. It was over 3,000 square feet of timber-framed construction and had vaulted ceilings, 4 bedrooms, and a 4-car garage on just under 2 acres that had looked out at the 12th green of the Priest Lake golf course. Ethan's girlfriend had come a long way from the circumstances of her first few years, and Ethan had been happy to bring her into the fold. That fall semester, the two of them started spending time at the King Road residence. Dylan Mortensen, Xana's second-floor roommate there, called Ethan and Xana the two best friends but perfect pair together. They both would look at each other with so much love, she wrote in a note that was read at their memorial. Everyone knew they were the perfect duo, and they both had this fun, passionate, crazy but good energy. Dylan had only met Ethan that fall semester and wished she had gotten to know him more. He was so sweet and loving to Xana, she said. Xana was like his whole world, and you could just see it in him. And Dylan felt Ethan's love as well, but differently. I got to experience what an older brother would be like, she said. He was easygoing and easy to talk to. Bethany Funk, the first floor roommate, said similar things, that in Ethan's presence, the whole vibe of the room would go up and everyone was just instantly happier. Ethan and Xana's relationship, Bethany said, made people believe in true love. On November 6, 2022, Stacy and Jim went back to the University of Idaho campus for their second parent and family weekend. All 5 of the family members stood together outside the Sigma Chi house for a photograph. There were leaves on the ground, and Stacy, a red mug in her hand, proudly wore a University of Idaho jacket. The rest of her family held red solo cups, the sun in their eyes, and a flush on their faces from the autumn weather. Ethan stood between his mother and sister, towering over them, his long arms draping around their shoulders. The dimples in his cheeks were as white as nickels when he smiled. Jim and Stacy could tell their triplets were doing well at school. "We will no longer have to worry about these kids," Stacy said as they headed home, 1 week before Ethan's murder. Chapter 31. Hunter Johnson met Ethan during rush week, when freshmen interested in the Greek system made the rounds of fraternity or sorority houses, which lure them with friendship and parties, hoping to curry memberships. Hunter was already a member of Phi Delta Theta when Ethan came through. The Phi Delta chapter at Eastern Washington University, an hour away, would be sanctioned in the coming year for hazing rituals, getting their pledges drunk, blindfolding them, and shoving them into a forest for the night. The University of Idaho Phi Delts had no such hazing complaints and were in good standing with the university when Ethan toured its facilities. Ethan was the first boy Hunter spoke with during rush week. To Hunter, Ethan seemed goofy but in a fun way, someone the equally tall and athletic Hunter could look forward to playing basketball with. Although Ethan eventually chose another fraternity, Sigma Chi, the 2 boys enjoyed a lasting bond. They partied together, double-dated, played sports in their free time, and visited Hunter's family cabin together. Hunter often snuck the underage Ethan's booze into parties for him. During the summer of 2022, Hunter and his girlfriend Emily frequently went golfing with Ethan and Xana. Ethan's charismatic personality and infectious smile would light up the course those days. At the memorial in Post Falls, Hunter would stand at the podium and tell the crowd, "You knew it was going to be a good time when we had more drinks in our bag than we did golf balls." Eventually, Hunter would break into tears. Hunter was on hand for 2 of the police noise complaint visits to 1122 King Road in the months before the murders. A second video of the August 16th body cam footage, shot from the vantage point of an officer who remained primarily along the perimeter of the residence while the incident unfolded, fleshes out the events and Hunter's part in them from a different angle. During the late afternoon get-together, Hunter accompanied Kayla Gonzalez through 1122 King Road's second-floor sliding glass door to meet police officers responding to a noise complaint made against the house on the back deck. It was hot outside, and Hunter's blue Nike-branded polo-style golf shirt was unzipped to his sternum. His shoes were also Nikes, retro white with the black swoosh that had come back into style with college kids a few years ago. Hunter walked cautiously, then sat on the curb alert couch, while an officer questioned Kaylee about the noise levels coming from inside. The sun made a direct hit, and Hunter rubbed his forehead with the back of his hand, momentarily pushing aside his floppy, middle-parted hair. He wore a white zip tie on his right wrist, and another zip tie hanging from the first, seemingly remnants from a recent party. In the Greek system, zip tie parties are a form of a group drinking game in which two people are cuffed together until they've consumed a predetermined quota of alcohol. With his left hand, Hunter blocked the sun from his face, squinting through his fingertips at the officers and at the portable beer pong table and red Solo cups in a stack behind them. Then he unexpectedly stood up, while, again, one of the officers was still talking to Kaylee. Sunlight hit the zipper on Hunter's shirt as he turned back towards the house. The officer's black shadow landed against the couch where Hunter had been sitting. Kaylee received her verbal warning, but Hunter was already inside by then. 2 weeks later, on September 1st, 2022, as previously mentioned, Hunter, accompanied by a friend, greeted Moscow police officers at the front door to 1122 King Road after this particular night's initial noise complaint had been made. Hunter wore a light gray polo shirt, dark-hued shorts, and his Nikes. He could see from the doorway that there were a lot of cops outside. Some stood in the driveway, some closer to the door. One of them had asked to speak to a legal tenant, but Hunter explained, "So I just looked around for everyone that lives here, and they're not here right now." "No one's here that lives here at all?" the officer asked. Hunter shook his head. "No one's here that lives here," he said. After some back and forth about whether or not the partygoers were trespassing, the officer asked, "Well, who does live here? What are their names?" Hunter's friend spoke up. "I'm actually not sure," the boy said. Hunter shook his head again as if to say, "I don't know either." In the second body cam video, as the officer approached the residence, two young women in denim shorts quickly exited the driveway on foot, sliding toward the darker edges to avoid coming face to face with the police. He trained his flashlight on them, cornering them with the halo. "You guys haven't been drinking or anything, right?" "No," the girls said. "Okay, drive careful, okay?" "Thanks," one of the girls said. The officer continued to approach the house. He was accompanied by his ride-along, a civilian who shadows a police officer for training or educational purposes. "It's hilarious," the officer chuckled. "As soon as they know it's the cops, they just blend into the darkness." He chuckled again when another of the officers, responding, yelled to the upstairs window, "We're only here for a noise complaint. Come to the damn door." Second-floor windows were rectangles of light. "We'll figure out who lives here eventually," the body cam officer says to his ride-along. Several more minutes passed. Nobody had yet answered the door. The officer radioed his dispatcher. "Moscow 157, do we have any recent involvements at 1122 Queen?" he asked, mistaking the address the way it would again be mistaken on the phone with Maddie. Hunter and his friend could be heard finally opening the front door and engaging with the officers responding. The audio captured one of the cops popping the Truly vodka seltzer cans and spilling them into the weeds, and caught Hunter avoiding straight answers to their questions. No, there was nobody present who lived in the house. No, he did not know their names. The sound of Hunter's voice crossed in the darkness. The second body camera caught nuances that the first one hadn't. How poorly lit the grounds were at night. How easily a human form could slink toward the periphery unseen. This footage came from the chest camera worn by Corporal Brett Payne, who only 2 months later would take the lead on the King Road homicide investigations. He'd walk through the scene, taking notes of the bodies and of so much blood everywhere. Hunter Johnson, who had played a drunken game of verbal cat and mouse with Payne's team just months ago, had reportedly made the 911 call. Chapter 32. 2 a.m. is a dark hour. That's what Stacy Chapin told a Seattle reporter soon after her son's murder. She was referring to the sleepless, horrible nights the family was enduring together, struggling to understand what had happened and how to move through it. On November 30th, 2022, Stacy walked to the podium at the University of Idaho vigil. She seemed comfortable on stage, and her voice, perhaps from her years of teaching, projected well in the hushed auditorium. "I'm Stacy Chapin," she said. "I'm Ethan's mom." Then she broke down crying. Eventually, she said, "The University of Idaho is a special place for our family personally. Our triplets enrolled here together because of the small town feel, the beautiful campus, and the Greek system. Those were all mandatory must-haves when picking a school." She sniffled above the microphone. "The people here were kind and welcoming when we showed up for orientation, and we knew as a family that we had made the right choice." A photo of Ethan as a teenager appeared on the screen of the network streaming the event. He wore a blue flannel shirt, and his hair across his forehead looked windswept. "The circumstances that bring us here tonight, they're terrible. The hardest part, we cannot change the outcome." Stacy Chapin looked out over a crowd of faces. "Our family is probably no different than your families," she said. "We sat at the dinner table when time permitted. We played games together. We traveled. We hauled our kids to every new sporting event imaginable. We had cribbage tournaments, pickleball competitions, and basketball shooting contests. We surfed. We spent countless hours on our boat, listening to country music, which was Ethan's most favorite thing in the whole wide world." In fact, the Chapin family did seem a little different. They seemed like they had it all, and many don't. They had done their best to make the most of it. "But the most important thing is that in our family, we always had each other's backs, and we will continue to do so." A young woman in the audience was crying. A young man stood behind her, holding on. "We are eternally grateful that we spent so much time with him," Stacy said through tears. She addressed the audience more directly now. "That's the most important message that we have for you and your families, is to make sure that you spend as much time as possible with those people, because time is precious and it's something you can't get back." She thanked the Moscow Police Department, the FBI, and the Idaho State Police for their continued efforts in helping to find the King Road murderer. She also thanked the worldwide followers of the case, many of whom had been reaching out with condolences over social media. "Please continue to support all 4 of our families," she added, "and please, be kind." Her husband Jim didn't speak. Through the many interview requests and the glare of news cameras and photographers chasing their family, Jim had said very few words, other than to agree with his wife or to console her with understanding looks when she cried. The pain on Jim's face and the flush along his cleanly shaven head said all that really brightly mattered to him. His boy was gone and wasn't coming back. When Jim finally did speak at any length, it was in the spring, to Good Morning America, filming him and Stacy at a Washington State tulip farm. Yellow and white tulips lined the soil in long rows across a large, healthy acreage. The wind seemed to come from a long ways off. "It's tough," Jim said softly, in a voice that seemed to have gathered from tears at the back of his throat. He wore a yellow University of Idaho ball cap and a gray hoodie beneath his black University of Idaho puffy jacket. He still had his other 2 kids going to school, and that was something to be proud of. They still needed his support, even if a piece of his heart had disappeared with Ethan. Tough not having him here. Stacy and I get up, watch the sunrise, and drink our coffee. He shook his head, searching for words. His ears were red from the wind, and his eyes were red around the rims from sadness. "Cry in our coffee," he added. That's how they spent their mornings, even months later, even when spring had been blossoming from the ground, when rain clouds instead of snow clouds gathered overhead. Spring was a long ways from now, though. Coping would take all winter and the rest of the winters ahead of them as well.